Our good topic is the Great Depression. In this presentation, we will first give a brief introduction on the Great Depression, then move to discuss about its background, cause, and the effect. Finally, we will compare the Great Depression with the financial crisis in 2008. Let's start from a brief introduction on the Great Depression. It was an economic depression between 1929 to 1939. The Great Depression first started at the United States, but it also brings lots of negative effects to other countries, especially those countries in Europe. This graph shows how worse the Great Depression was. This graph shows the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index. The index from 381 dropped to 41, which means the value of US stock market dropped over 90% in only 2 years. This graph is about the price level in US. The consumer price index and the wholesale price index dropped 25% and 35% in only 4 years after the Great Depression. This figure is about the peak to trough decline in industrial production in various countries. From the graph, we can see that Europe countries also affected, like Poland dropped over 35% and Germany dropped over 30%. Let's talk about the gold standard. It is a monetary system by participation countries to set a fixed price between their currency and the gold to enhance the stability of the currency. This gold standard was broken down during World War I, but republished in 1925. Then we move to talk about the background of the Great Depression. Before the Great Depression, there is a period called the Roaring Twenties. In this period, Federal Reserve lowered the interest rate to increase the money supply in US, leading to a rapid economic growth. US became the richest country in the world. With the appreciation of US stock market, it reached the unexpected high peak. In the Roaring Twenties, there are two US presidents called Warren G. Harding and Calvin Coolidge, promoting less government intervention approach, cutting taxes to bring more money into the market, due to the continuous economic growth in 1920s. The economic environments also helped to increase the economic growth, like the new technology enable mass production, which make available cheap products into middle class. The huge investment into infrastructure and the creation of T4 model lead to increase in trade in US, boosting the economic activities.
After having a brief introduction on the Great Depression, here comes the reasons that triggers this disaster. To begin with, it is because of stock market crash. In October 1929, when stock market crashed, the 31st President of US, Herbert Hoover, refused to intervene but left the market to deal with the problem itself, which finally triggered deflation. Confidence of investors dropped and thus rushing for it, selling off the stocks in hand. This led to a 340 points drop in Dow Jones, from the highest level, 381 points on the 3rd of October, to 41 points in 29th of October. 2 months after the crash in October, stockholders lost 40 billion, even though the stock market showed some signal of rise. This could not cover most of the losses. This was considered to be the major blasting fuse of the Great Depression. Secondly, it is because of bank run. Since most of the banks before crisis are small, individual banks which lack resources. Due to the sudden drop in Dow Jones, depositors' fear of bank failure arose. Simultaneous withdrawal of deposits forced these banks to fire sell their assets. These formed a vicious cycle. The more Americans withdrew, the more banks failed. By the 1933, more than 110,000 out of 25,000 nation banks collapsed. This hit the Wall Street badly. And here is the summary. Thirdly, it is due to the false sense of prosperity. In the 1920s, which is called the Roaring Twenties, US relied heavily in industrial production. Due to the unparalleled growth in industrial and agricultural sectors, wealth disparity was serious. According to statistics, over 60% of the population was living under poverty with poor living environment. On the other hand, 33% of the income was controlled by 5% of the richest people, and 40% of the nation's wealth was owned by the richest 1%. This unequal distribution of wealth between the agricultural and industrial sector led to an imbalanced purchasing power, together with the high tax regime, which raised the marginal tax rate on income from around 4% to over 8%, as well as capital income from around 30% to over 40%. Few and few people tend to borrow money from investment, which finally led to the stagnated growth in economic field.
There are also mistakes by Fed. In 1928, Fed tightens monetary policy to fight against over-leverage, willing to reduce over-speculation in stock markets. During the time, US governments also decided to increase interest rates, trying to maintain USD with gold standard, but unexpectedly, it made failure of greater or small bank due to no liquidity, triggered US into a deeper recession. Thus, both is a great job occurred in 1930 to 1936. Hundreds of thousands of farmers borrowed money from banks during Roaring Twenties now cannot pay back their loans due to very high interest rates. They have to sell their farm at a very low price. They are unemployment now, making deeper recessions. In 1930s, US President Herbert Hoover signed Smooth-Hawley Tariff Act, making tariffs on imported goods in his highest value in 100 years. These kinds of protectionism revenged by his trading partners. They all increased their tariffs on US goods as well. As a result, no one gets benefits, including the US. All countries export jobs. US goods prices drop, low employment rates have made wages cuts, some were even fired. Unemployment rates rised into 25%, facing deflation. People tend to hold their cash. As a result, the debt burdens increase.
So let's talk about the effects of Great Depression. First, we take a look what was happening in US. Before the Great Depression happened, there was only 3.14% of unemployment rate. By the 1930s, it jumped to 8.67%. From the chart, we can observe that it almost reached 1/4 in 1933. This is the highest percentage in record. Let's take a look on another country. For example, Germany had near 30%, Australia 29%, northern industry areas in UK even reached to 70%. Unemployed people had a low living standard. They do not get enough money to deal with their meals. In an official statistics, there were 110 deaths caused by hunger. Moreover, when people are unemployed in large numbers, it hurts the rest of the economy, creating a cyclical problem. Unemployed people contribute less to the economy because they are spending less. They did not participate in paying tax due to lack of jobs. Consequently, the government ends up borrowing money because of low revenues and high spending. High unemployment rate cause the government to have higher welfare costs. They seek the government to finance their daily spending. This is creating a heavy burden on budget and cutbacks in other areas. Wealth is due from the economy for unproductive purpose, and economic growth slows down as there are fewer funds for infrastructure development. So let's talk about trade collapse. Trade collapse was mainly caused by protectionism. Many countries set up high trade barriers in hopes of boosting their domestic industry and curbing unemployment. The measure turned out a negative effect. Global trade volume fell by 25% between 1929 and 1933. Also, it led to a serious collapse of companies, especially those operating in the export of industry. Since the less products were imported into the country, capital income of the country had reduced. A chain reaction was decreasing in GDP. The last one is industrial production. Besides trade collapse, the affected country industrial production amount and value has dropped significantly. The main factor was US decline in spending. It then transmitted to the rest of the world through gold standard. US suffered highest drop in percentage, which near 47%. There was an infrastructure situation in Great Britain. It stopped declining soon.
Let's focus on the comparison of background and cause between the Great Depression and credit crisis. There are three major similarities. The first similarity is the fast build-up period. Both the financial crisis experienced an abundant liquidity in the financial sector, as mentioned before. For the Great Depression, the growth rate of stock market was about 41% due to the Roaring Twenties. A large amount of the money was pumped into the US stock market. Similarly,
There are 48% growth rate in stock market of US from 1990s to 2007. The reason behind is the global saving gap. After Asian financial crisis, those developing countries consume less and save more money, resulting in abundant liquidity flow in US housing market. Secondly, both of the crises have low inflation rates. For the Great Depression, when the country can no longer maintain the gold standard policy, the demand of gold become larger, so the government reduced the money supply and hard to maintain its gold standard and thus resulting in deflation. As for credit crisis in 2008, there was a drop in inflation rate from 12% to 4%, even though the liquidity has increased. The low inflation and low nominal interest rate encourage people to borrow it for investment. Finally, both cases have fallen risk premium, which didn't reveal the risk potential. For the Great Depression, the average risk premium kept falling to low level. For the credit crisis, there was a deregulation of supply mortgage from monetary institutions and government. Due to the great deal of easy money, the bank also lent money to the risky people, regardless of the high risk involved. Also, insurance companies were pulled together to attract investors, and the structured finance repackaged the cash flow from safety and risk part. All these securitization add up to create a new low risk premium environment. There were no irrationality involved at all. People were just borrowing money and invest in some financial product with high return. If the policymaker didn't control the monetary flow, the risk that fund will be misallocated to bad creditors.
During the first few years of the Great Depression, the US government implemented little fiscal policy. In the credit crisis, however, expansionary fiscal policy was used. In the Great Depression, as the automatic stabilizer will increase the US government spending during recession with the idea of balancing current account. In the beginning of the crisis, the government can even want to implement some restrictive policies. For example, there is a tax increase. In the financial crisis, however, policymakers were willing to undertake more drastic activities when taking measures to improve the economic situations. The government provides policies such as stabilizers and tax cut and stimulus package, which were estimated to contribute for 1% of GDP. It is noteworthy that the huge size of fiscal policy may result in huge debt, which is a large burden to the future generation. For example, debt to GDP crisis in 2009 is larger than 1934. In the first 5 years of the Great Depression, the many affected governments did restrictive monetary policy. The money supply decreased during the Great Depression, and the bank runs have the effect of reducing the velocity of money. The decrease in money supply increased the nominal interest rate and discount rate, and there was a deflation in Great Depression. The real interest rate was even higher, which in turn reduced the overall consumption and investment, enhanced the GDP. Different from the Great Depression, the affected governments undergo expansionary monetary policy. During the credit crisis, interest rates were declining in nearly all advanced countries to about 1%. In the financial crisis, the money supply was increasing due to the offensive actions done by the government. For example, open market purchase and especially the 3 rounds of QE implemented by the US. Protectionism appeared in both crises, but the degree of protectionism during the Great Depression was much larger than the financial crisis. For example, the average tariff rate rose by 12.7% during the Great Depression, and there was a famous act enacted by the US. The effect was the world trade decreased by 66%. During the financial crisis, there was also signs from protectionism as the world trade dropped by 30% since the 2008. There were currency wars during both crises, but the degree of currency war in the Great Depression was much severe than that of credit crisis. In both crises, the governments devalued their currency so as to increase the export and decrease the imports, which in turn increased the overall GDP for the countries. This is important for those countries to recover from bad economy, but this is a beggar thy neighbor action, which increased tensions in nations. This kind of devaluation will be detrimental to other countries. The currency war in Great Depression may be a reason for tensions before the World War II.